Hi guys, I watched the Barbie movie this weekend and I have notes. I don't know if you can tell. Yeah, I have notes and I'm gonna talk about them as I make pancakes for my breakfast because I need to multitask today. So we're just gonna start off strong with this disclaimer. If you haven't seen the movie and you're planning on seeing the movie, do not watch this video unless you want avid amount of spoilers. Don't watch this video. I'm giving you the warning right now. Spoiler alert. I will be talking about specific scenes and whatnot in the movie. Okay? This is how I'm gonna set it up. First, I'm gonna talk about the beginning of the movie when they're in Barbie land and everything's perfect and beautiful and everything. Then I'm gonna talk about when they get to the real world, Barbie and Ken, and talk about that a little bit. Then I'm gonna talk about Kendom, where Ken goes back and messes up everything and how Barbie comes back and she looks at all of that. Then I'm gonna be talking about Barbie's character, not development, but like how she transformed, I guess development throughout the movie. Talk about that. I'm gonna talk about how Ken changed in the movie and kind of what he represents in that sense. Talk about Alan a little bit. I didn't really have any thoughts on Weird Barbie yet, so I don't have anything to say to that right now. I've seen other people say stuff, but I don't really have anything of my own, so. And then I'm gonna talk about the mother-daughter relationships and things we can get from the movie that describe that. And then the last thing is just womanhood in general and how this movie kind of represents that and what it does in showing that. So that's the layout. This may or may not be a lengthy video. It depends on how fast I can speak. So first, we're gonna talk about in Barbie Land. So in Barbie Land, you know, everything is basically perfect. It's the perfect day, the perfect clothes, the perfect friends, you know. Oh, the water is the perfect temperature. She wakes up, her hair is perfect. You know, her food pops out, everything's perfect, everything's nice. And in there, nobody knows anything but perfection. Seeing, and in Barbie Land, you know, you kind of have that, little girls have that representation of, you know, I can be anything, I can do anything, you know, because in the movie, you know, the Supreme Court is made up of all women and the president is a woman and, you know, women are doctors and physicists and writers and all of these things, kind of just showing that you can really be anything. Anyone can really be anything. And in, you know, Barbie Land, we see that, like, the men respect women's boundaries. Like, we see Ken ask Barbie, like, oh, can I stay over tonight? And, you know, he's like, oh, we're boyfriend, girlfriend, like, can I stay over? And she's like, to do what? And he's like, you know, I don't really know. And she's like, no, it's girls' night, and every night's gonna be girls' night, and this, that, and the third. And he's like, okay. And he doesn't push her, he doesn't force her, he doesn't force himself onto her. He just kind of lets her do her thing. Men respecting women's boundaries and not getting violent with them, you know? It's a really, like, carefree environment in Barbie Land, especially for women, because you don't have to worry about all the convoluted expectations of being a woman, right? And I've been seeing this, and I agree with it, all over TikTok and everything, talking about how, like, in Barbie Land, that's kind of like the representation of when you were like a young girl, like when you were a child who just played with her dolls and had fun and thought up, you know, I can be anything and I can do anything. The world is my oyster, you know, before your bubbles kind of burst by having to deal with societal expectations of being a woman and the way men ogle you, and, you know, that leads us into when Barbie and Ken go to the real world. Barbie and Ken go to the real world. Immediately, you have men ogling Barbie. I mean, looking at her like she's nothing more than an object to fuck. And she's becoming, you know, she says herself, she's like, I'm extremely conscious right now, but like of myself. Like, what is that called? She becomes self-conscious. She's, you know, overthinking herself. And, you know, then there's a scene where the man, you know, assaults her by slapping her ass and punches him in the face. And you hear the police officers in the, you know, precinct talking, and they're like, oh, like, Because at first she's wearing like this like tight outfit, you know, and it's like, oh, like less clothing, like, ooh, she looks good, da 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 da, all this whispering about her. Then next thing, they get let out, they go put on like these Western outfits, they don't pay for it because they don't know the concept of money, and a guy's chasing them down, and they get back to the precinct, and it's like, ooh, she looks even better with more clothes on. You can imagine what it looks like off, you know, and it's like, the real world with this objectification was like such a culture shock to her. And the thing that really shocks Barbie is because she thought that, you know, as doing her work as Barbie, you know, being that doll representation of what like a woman can be, you know, like an entrepreneur, you know, anything that she wants to be, she thought that the world was fixed and that, you know, women were running things and that women had say and women had like, you know, rights and were respected and, you know, were looked upon with like such great like honor. And she gets there and it's like this, I don't know why I said there, like that there. She gets there and it's like the men are running everything and that women are objectified and talked down to and, you know, misunderstood. And now you have, you know, that happened and you have the patriarchy. And this is where Ken discovers the patriarchy. And I'll get into that more later when I talk about Ken and his stuff. But, you know, Barbie realizes how kind of messed up the real world is. And she sees that and she's genuinely appalled, which is, you know, fair enough. And another thing that she notices in the real world is pain. And she also discovers aging. She discovers pain and she cries for the first time. This is a part of when I get to Barbie's like transformation, but this is when she starts to see the different levels and complexities that come with being human, the depths of emotion and feeling that you can have as a person, and how, you know, you can age and things. She discovers change and she discovers the beauty in it, despite it being negative change, positive change. She starts to discover that people can change and be different and be deep and feeling, and she's intrigued by it. She discovers that in what it's like to be human when she gets to the real world. And, you know, another fun little tidbit of when she gets into the real world, she goes to the Mattel headquarters, which, you know, runs Barbie and everything and makes the Barbies and all that stuff, and she's like, can I talk to the woman in charge? There's no woman in charge, it's men making decisions about women. Another aspect level talking about how our world works, of men making decisions for women as if they're the best representation to do that. Now here's where we get into the nitty-gritty. When Ken goes back. So Ken discovers patriarchy in the real world and he feels the sense of self, sense of like empowerment in seeing that there is a institution in which men are always on top and never have to listen to women, and women are put down as a cause of that. And he is in love with it, mainly for the horses in the most Ken way possible, but he likes that it'll give him a voice that he felt like he hadn't had. So, you know, he goes and all the Kens take over all the Barbies' houses, make them their Mojo Dojo Casa houses, and they have all the women dressed up, serving them, giving them foot rubs, giving them beers, handing them out, just kind of being props to the side to hold up Ken. Barbie comes back and she sees this and she's devastated. She goes to her house and notices that Ken has moved in, redecorated. She starts throwing her stuff out, and part of this is also because of the unrequited love between Barbie and Ken. In this movie, it's obvious Ken has feelings for Barbie. Barbie doesn't feel the same about Ken, and you know, Ken gets a bit hurt and emotional about the fact that Barbie just rejects him over and over and over again. And he learns about something that puts him in power, and this is a little bit more into depth about Ken. But anyways, so in the Kendom, you're seeing men choosing themselves and power over people that they previously cared about. The Barbies. they're just so in love with this power that they have now, and they hurt people. And there's also this narrative in the kingdom that women are thriving in patriarchy because they don't have to think. So the women don't have to think of, oh, thinking was just so hard, and being in charge was just so hard because I have to think all the time. Now I just have somebody telling me what to do, and it's just so perfect and better. That's something that's shown in the kingdom. And then we have the kingdom also showing that men's biggest enemy are themselves, because when the Barbies come and they try to take back Barbie land, they pit all the men against each other by, petty jealousy between the Kens. And and then the Kens are preoccupied. They don't get to vote to change the constitution because they're too busy fighting with each other. Kind of alluding to the fact that men's biggest enemy are gonna be themselves. As much as they want to blame women for everything wrong that's ever happened to them, most of the time it's really other men that are their problem and their issue. Now that we've got that out of the way, we're gonna talk about individual people. So we're gonna talk about Barbie. Barbie's whole thing. So in the beginning, she had this blissful little life where she didn't worry about anything going wrong. She didn't worry about death. She didn't worry about aging. She didn't worry about anything until I forgot America's character's name. I'm just gonna call her America. Where America's playing with the Barbie, and kind of because she's sad, it translates into the Barbie's head. And Barbie then, starts having these thoughts of death and feelings of loneliness and sadness. And her perfect little bubble is popped, She is shrouded by realities of the world, right? And that kind of puts a wrench in her whole every day is perfect all the time type of narrative and life that she's been living. When she goes to the real world and she sees, just how patriarchy is so harmful and prevalent in the real world, that immediately the moment that she got to Venice Beach, she was looked at, she was objectified, she was, harassed almost immediately. She realizes how harmful the real world is, right? She sees that, she understands it, and she's appalled by it. And in the beginning, she's almost like, I'm so lucky that my world isn't like this. That my world is women are in charge, and the men don't objectify us, and the men respect us, and the men, let us have our things and our glory, and they respect us. And as she goes around in discovering the real world, she, like I mentioned before, appreciates the beauty in humanity and all of the pain and the love and the suffering and the happiness and the joy and everything that folds one on top of the other that means to be human. She discovers it and she falls in love with it. There's the scene that the directors, or not the directors, the producers actually almost had Greta cut, was the one where Barbie's on the bench and there's this old lady there, and she just looks at her and she's like, you're so beautiful, because Barbie's never seen a person who's aged before. She's a doll. She just appreciates, just life in itself and what time grants life, the gift that is aging and growing and changing. That's why when we see in the end, when they finally take back Barbie Land, Barbie feels like she knows too much about the real world, about change, about, difference, about life, joy, happiness, all of that stuff that means to be human. She's seen it, and now she can't go back to perfect every day. Nothing goes wrong and nothing changes. It's not even that she can't go back to perfection. She can't go back to a place where nothing changes, because she's seen how change can move people and elevate them and add so much more complexity to them that she just can't, bring herself to do that. And that's why we see in the end Barbie make that choice to be human, because despite the pain that it comes with being a human woman, despite the pain that comes with just being human in general, despite all of the loss and the suffering that happens due to change, that it's out of your control, she finds the beauty in the fact that humans are allowed to change. That humans have the capacity to change, and that's why she chooses to be human. And more on that in a second, but Ken goes from being the man who is loving and respecting boundaries of women, you know, opinions, thoughts, feelings of women. He goes from being that guy to finding something that gives him power, a sense of importance, and using that to then put down women to elevate himself. And it's so hurtful to see that, because the amount of men that happens to, they feel inferior in some way, and they find something that gives them power, and in turn they put women down for that. They choose to hurt women instead of communicating their hurt feelings, and it hurts everybody. I mean, in Ken, you see that the patriarchy, it still hurts him too. He still hasn't found himself. He's still not happy. All he has is power. And even in the end, you see Ken, you know, crying and like trying to make it up to Barbie, and still almost making advances at her, and she's like, no. And you see that Barbie still has to clean up and apologize to him and make him feel better, even though he was in the wrong here. And Ken still not knowing who he is, even after having all that power from patriarchy, is kind of telling that, you know, patriarchy doesn't do for men what they think it does. It only further isolates you and puts you in a box than anything else. And it's just it was kind of sad seeing Ken go from this doting guy who just really liked a girl and wanted to make her happy, to throwing her clothes out the window, taking over her house, just to feel some power. It was heartbreaking. But on to Alan. So Alan obviously is very queer-coded. And I see Alan as kind of like a representation of any man, not even just like a gay man or a bi man or any man who understands and knows that the patriarchy also hurts them too, and is not a fan of it, and understands that underneath patriarchy no one is allowed to truly be themselves and embrace themselves, because in patriarchy you have to be in a box. There are boxes in which people are supposed to occupy, and if you don't, you get singled out and ostracized and whatnot. And Alan kind of represents, you know, those men who will always listen and respect women first, who aren't quick to be like, not all men, who aren't quick to be like, well, I'm different. They listen to women's struggles and understand that patriarchy hurts us all, and they understand that women go through so much all the time, and it never stops. So, love Alan. Alan's a cutie. Alan is a slay. And then we have my last two moments here. We talk about mother-daughter relationships, and then the whole flow of the movie and really what it talks about in being a woman. Mother-daughter relationships. So the whole reason Barbie goes on this whole existential moment is that America's character starts playing with her daughter Sasha's Barbie to kind of go back to a time where things felt simpler, just playing with dolls. Go back to a time where she used to play dolls with her daughter because she was feeling lonely and just not enough, and she was kind of crumbling under the pressure of what it means to be a woman and be a mother, and she just wanted to go back to a time when she was just a little girl and it was simple. And a lot of people have talked about how it's just kind of leaving that movie theater, realizing that your mom is just a little girl at heart too, that she's living, you know, her life for the first time as well. She's trying to navigate motherhood in the complexity that is womanhood underneath the system of patriarchy, and you know, she deserves some grace because this is her first go around of it, and you know, she's not perfect. And there was a line where it was talking about how, you know, us mothers have to stay behind or stand behind so our daughters can see how far they've come. And it's kind of like that moment where you realize, you know, so many mothers put their lives on hold for their kids. So many mothers do so much for their children to have a chance, and especially their daughters, because of how complex and difficult it is to exist as a woman. And, you know, this kind of got me thinking about how just some mothers not even despise their daughters, but there's this added level of, there's another woman I have to take care of now. And there's some mothers who not even don't like their kids, but in having children, it makes it so much harder for them to exist as a woman, because now they have the added complexity of motherhood and what it means to be a good mother, defined in the way patriarchy defines womanhood. And you can't wear this, and you can't go here, and you can't do this and that and the third, because then you're a bad mother underneath the systems that we have and then the boxes we like to conform people into. And some mothers, I feel like they love their kids, but they hate how much having kids made them have to question their womanhood and things being more difficult for them. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully that does. Yeah, just kind of like showing that, like, your mother may be tough and have a tough exterior, but at her core she still is that, you know, young girl who wants to experience everything life has to offer her, and wants to, you know, grow and change, and dreams up that she could be anything. And now to the last point of this video, just how the movie talks about womanhood and what it means to be a woman, especially in, you know, this country of America. I mean, it applies other places too as well, but my only reference is America. So in America's I keep forgetting that character's name, and when I'm gonna put it in when I find it, but when her character goes on her entire like monologue about what it means to be a woman, she covers all of these contradictory statements in which we have to live within to be the ideal perfect woman under patriarchy. That we have to be thin, but we can't be too thin, and we can't say that we want to be thin. We have to say we want to be healthy, but you have to be thin. You know, you can't talk about your kids too much as a mother, but also you can't not talk about them too much because you're not a good mother. And you can't be, you know, too modest, and you can't be too this, and you can't, you know, dressed in a way in which you tempt men, but you also can't reject them, and you also can't. And it's, in listening to that monologue, I was genuinely, I felt so seen, because I say that monologue to myself about once, like, every month. It's so tired and exhausted with having to live within the complexities of and the contradictions of being a woman, and especially as a Black woman. I mean, and then that adds another layer to it, but that's not what I'm talking about now. That speech really just, I mean, hit home about how there is no way to be a perfect woman, because everything you do contradicts itself and has some sort of critique. And in the flow of the whole movie, just talking about womanhood, I mean, the beginning is almost like when you're young and you know, like, you know, nothing and everything, the world is your oyster, and everything, you know, you can do anything and you can do anything, and like, it's just carefree and blissful and ignorant to all the harms that the world has out for you. And then going to the real world was kind of almost like puberty, I guess. It was that culture shock that, like, whoa, oh my gosh, like, I'm being looked at, I'm being sexualized, I'm being touched, I have no real say in what I want to do, I have no, like, protection, it's just, this is what I have to live with. That's kind of like the outside world, I guess, like, noticing that kind of away from you. And then going back to Barbie land when it becomes Kendom is kind of like when the people closest to you, and by people I mean men closest to you, start buying into patriarchy and treating you less than because they found something that gives them power, and you don't know what happened to the person that you cared about or respected, where that went, all of a sudden it's gone. Then, you know, you have winning back that Barbie land, and Barbie still having to be the one to apologize to Ken. Barbie still being there to confront him, to console him, to make sure that his ego was okay, even after he was the one who made her life a living hell. Kind of showing that even when we get through, we're still responsible for men's behavior, and having to make sure that they're okay, and making sure that everyone is emotionally okay even before we figure out if we are. And then we have in the very end where Barbie chooses humanity instead of being a doll, and it's almost like choosing to still enjoy life as a woman, even when you know that life is hard. You could choose to conform to the pressure, or you could choose to be happy and just throw caution to the wind and be whatever woman is defined for you. Like, be whatever you feel woman is to you, be that. That's how I saw that final scene in which she chose to be human. It's like, even though it's pain and it's heartache and it's suffering, change and joy and happiness and learning and changing and growing is worth it. The entirety of the movie was really just like a timeline of how it means to live as a woman, and so many things in there that I don't think men get or understand or will ever get or understand. Not because they can't, but because they choose not to. In that movie, it was just really a flawless piece of work, if I do say so. It was, I mean, some of the most relatable stuff I've seen in a while. I mean, being a woman is complicated and it's so hard, and I don't know how we do it. And we look good while doing it, but just the crushing feeling of not being enough under patriarchy is debilitating. And that was kind of my thesis of the whole thing, is everyone struggles with being enough. Even Ken, you know, because he thought he felt overlooked and underappreciated by Barbie, and he found something that gave him power, and he took it, and it hurt Barbie in the process. But everyone struggles with being enough. Everybody struggles with being enough, and patriarchy doesn't help. Patriarchy makes it worse, because we have these standards in which we feel like we have to reach to be enough, and most people will never reach those. So at the end of my long analysis of the Barbie movie, I just want to say, you are enough. You're enough just the way you are. You don't have to be more for anyone. If you want to be more for yourself, you go for it. But don't think that you're not enough. You are. You really are. We're all different. We're all unique. We're all special. That's just why the world works. We're all different. If we were all the same, it'd be pretty boring. So, love yourself. You're enough. And watch the Barbie movie again. Thank you for joining me here. You're my fancy little pancake. Woo. And yeah, it's my fun little analysis. Au revoir. Love you. Her slay.